If you've been following us here at Iconic Motorbikes, you know that our favorite days are the days that we get a container. Today we got something in from Japan with 24 bikes, and they're all cool for their own reasons. So let's take a look at them and I'll show you a few of my favorites. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk about every single bike in detail, but let's look at them all and I'll point out some highlights as we go. It's always fun to see how the crew kind of unloads everything. They put all the big bikes in one section for us, which is nice. Or I should say they put all like the Japanese big bikes in one section. So we got a Gixxer 750 here. Very cool Olin shock on this one. Gixxer 1100. Kawasaki ZX-R, another Gixxer 750, another Gixxer 750. It's always nice when I get to say that. It's kind of crazy that they can overlap like that. And another Gixxer 1100. Out of all this whole group, this one has a special place in my heart only because it's a paint job that we never got in the US, and it has one of those poor translations if you see here on the tail. Gixxer Hyper Endurancer. Kind of a reference to their endurance racing with this bike. Also over there, one of the water-cooled or liquid-cooled Gixxers, the Tiger Stripes. A lot of guys love these paint jobs because they're so unique. And then one of Adam's favorite bikes. If Adam was doing this video, we'd be talking about this bike for the next 20 minutes. I don't love them as much, but they are very, very cool. Suzuki TL1000R. So we'll see. I think the battery's not dead. It won't start. It's been sitting for a bit, but 21,000 kilometers. And just like we're going to do for all of these bikes, our shop's going to go through it, make sure it runs. We'll get the paperwork in, and then we look forward to putting up on the auction site. Okay, so I lied. We have a couple more Japanese big bikes over here. You can see behind me, there's a few more little bikes we'll talk about in just a second. But these are extra special. They are first-year Hayabusas, Suzuki Hayabusas, of course. A little fun fact for you, 1998, the first year of the model, was the only year that it was offered in this copper color that you see here. They were also unrestricted. Japan and a couple other federal governments all around the world started to get concerned about how fast these bikes were getting, and so later years of this were actually restricted. So this is one of the few years that you can A, get this paint job and get it unrestricted. What's also kind of cool is because these are Japanese models, the dashes are in kilometers, it's very rare that you're going to be able to see 340 as a digit anywhere on a motorcycle dash. One of these looks a little more stock at first, but they both have some modifications. I think Adam and I are going to talk about maybe we actually kind of take some of the parts off one and the other and make one more stock, one more modified. For example, this one has handlebars on it as opposed to the clip-ons, but we'll figure all that out later. One little fun fact, or an extra fun fact, I should say. So you've got this logo here, right? Japanese version of Hayabusa, or the symbol for Hayabusa. The name Hayabusa came out because that is Japanese for peregrine falcon.
Hayabusa. The name is taken from the Japanese peregrine falcon, a creature capable of slicing the wind at over 300 kilometers per hour.
And in the world of nature, a peregrine falcon, its natural prey is a blackbird.
Suddenly, everything else looks like prey.
Honda fans will know that before this bike came out, Honda had the Super Blackbird, the CBR 1100XX, at the time known as the fastest motorcycle around. So when Suzuki made their newer version, their faster version, they named it in a little bit of gamesmanship or one-upsmanship. They named it as the natural predator of their bike, the Hayabusa, or the peregrine falcon. So, kind of cool. You don't really see that stuff anymore. I feel like everything's just named letters and numbers. So it's always nice to have cool different names for bikes. All right, with that said, let's take a look at some smaller stuff back here. I don't know how Adam finds a lot of this stuff. We got first of all, a whole bunch of motocompos. We got the whole range here of colors. Blue is an aftermarket option. Why'd you get blue? I see you there. He's just, yeah, no, you did a great job. So blue is very cool. I can't imagine there's other motocompos like this, but yellow, red, and white are stock colors. We historically here at Iconic have seen more of the red and yellows. I know there's several people that are looking for a white one, and here you go. Same thing as before. We'll go through them all, make sure they run. And they're all in varying, like again, the blue one's been repainted, doesn't have the decals on this cover here like that yellow one does, or this red one does here. I'll just show you an example of what I'm talking about for the cover, but you just have your original decals and things like that. Speaking of decals, Riff, if you don't mind coming around here, it's gonna be a tight squeeze. Yeah, the parking brake. My favorite decal in all of motorcycling, right here, untouchable. It's their way of saying basically that you can't grab the bike from there because they want you to be able to pick it up where it says carrying point instead. So that's what that decal is about. So when you do want to pick these up, that's how you do it. Off the carrying point, which is really the frame. It's just hidden behind the plastic. So that's the untouchable decal. We got the Yamaha YSR80 here. This is cool. Yamaha made a limited run of these in the Marlboro livery, of course, as an honor to the GP bikes that they were doing at the time. This is a custom paint job. This is either a TDR250 or an 80. I cannot tell at first glance, but these are really cool. Similar motors, but liquid cooled, and they're a little bit more upright, a little bit more comfortable for people my size. They're just so much fun, and they're different. These were not officially sold in the US, so to find one out here is pretty cool. But again, aftermarket paint job. So some people will like that, some people won't. This is an evolution. I'm gonna roll this forward a little bit. These are really, really cool. Most people see this and think YSR50, YSR80. This is, as you can see somewhere over there, a TZM or TZM-R. These were the evolution of the YSRs, the next generation. The YSRs were sold in the US, these were not. This is basically just an updated, better version of the YSR. Better suspension, liquid cooling, so a little bit more power, a little more reliable, and more importantly, if you're a YSR collector, things like that, just different. It's really hard to find these things. They are very cool. This one has a stock paint job, but the one I'm about to show you does not. So let's come on over here, good sir. So here's another one, same model, but very different look. Back in the day, there was a shop, they might still be around, and I apologize if they are, I'm not too familiar, but there's a shop in Japan called Clever Wolf Racing. They did lots of great stuff in endurance racing, sports bikes, that kind of thing. We've actually sold a proper R7 OW02 that Clever Wolf Racing built. And so I'll ask Riff, who's behind the camera right now, thank you Riff, I'll ask him to show you a couple of photos of what that bike looked, the proper R7. And you'll see that this has a paint job that matches it, which is very, very cool. But it's kind of a niche thing. I think only a few people will know what makes this so special. But again, it's just incredible that Adam was able to even track this down. So same thing, this is a TZM50R, just an update of the YSR, a little bit better in a few ways, not really found in the US, and that paint job is gonna catch some eyes for people in the know. Speaking of paint jobs, these two might be my favorite bikes in the whole collection. Both of them are Gixxer 50s. Now, Suzuki had a bunch of different names for these. They call them the RB50s, they call them the GAG 50s. We've sold a bunch of these here at Iconic, but these are not stock paint jobs. These have been made to look really well, but these paint jobs are really well done. These have been made to look like other special Gixxers, or in this case, Gammas, throughout history. So this one obviously looks like a Walter Wolf, say RG400 or RG500. And I gotta say, I don't think there'll be anyone else like this that has one of these. One of the funny things to me, historically, about the GAG 50s has been how they handle the SACS acronym. On the regular Gixxer 750s and Gixxer 1100s, I almost want, one of those will have it in the back. We'll cut to that in a second. They have these decals that say SACS, and they say Suzuki Advanced Cooling System. On the little bikes, they say Suzuki Advanced Comical System. and that is from OEM. That's not someone making well, it's someone making a joke, but it's from Suzuki themselves. So they've incorporated that part of the original design into it, which is very cool. But yeah, it's basically just a baby Walter Wolf, and it seems like the perfect complement if you already own one of these, even if it's the 250, 400, or 500 displacement. I can't imagine that you wouldn't want one of these as a display bike or a little pit bike next to that one. Speaking of which, this is another tribute to a custom or a very legendary Gixxer in the past. These represent, or this is like a tribute to the Gixxer limited editions. In 1986, Suzuki made 2 versions of a limited edition. Now, historically, Suzuki has not really done much of that homologation special bike that you see from the other Japanese brands, you know, like a RC30, RC45, the Yamaha R7, that kind of thing. Suzuki doesn't do that very often. Back in '86, they made a limited edition. It had a few pretty trick features, but really what made it stand out back in the day was the fact that it had a dry clutch. So they made a version for the US, which had a mostly white paint job with some red and blue accents. And then they made a version for Japan, which was inspired by the Yoshimura team race colors of kind of this dark brown or bronze and red. So this specific paint job you see here looks very similar to the Gixxer 750 1986 limited edition that was in Japan. Impressively, if you can look here, you'll see the stock headlight on a GAG 50 is supposed to be the square that you see here. Someone back in the day cut this out and then added dual round headlights, which is what a Gixxer of the time would have had. So I just love these things. They're, like I said, probably my 2 favorite bikes here in the collection. You're not going to cover long miles on them, but again, if you had, or if you have a JDM limited edition, this would be the perfect pair for it. So pretty cool, and kudos to whoever built these bikes and painted them in the past. 3 more bikes to show off real quick here. We got another Yamaha YSR, either a 50 or an 80. You can tell by the frames. 2GX, so this is a YSR80. One of the things you can also do on one of these to tell quickly, usually, the 80s always have a tack. On the 50s, those were an option. But this is in the Galois paint scheme. Someone taught me how to pronounce that. It's the tribute to what they had, I think around 1984 or so, in their MotoGP bikes when Christian Sarron was racing, and sponsored by Galois cigarettes. So that blue, yellow, and light blue paintwork is a reflection of their MotoGP bike at the time. Another cool Yamaha is here, the TDR250, also known as the Ultimate Dual. This basically, I'm oversimplifying now, but it basically is a TZR250 motor, but in an upright platform. In fact, let me just sit on this so you get an idea for it. So I'm 6'3", and I'm actually quite comfortable on this. It's not a very fast bike, but it's one that was never sold in the US, so that's cool from a rarity standpoint. And these things were so ahead of their time. It was basically supposed to be a great upright commuter, street bike, not sport bike, but a sporty upright bike that you could, if you wanted to, take off-road a little bit, play in the dirt. And frankly, before Kawasaki updated their KLR 650 recently, this thing, some 30 years ago, was making more power and weighed, I don't know, 50, 70 pounds less, if not more, than a KLR 650. So it's just a funny, way ahead of its bike time. A lot of people are interested in these, and so we're excited to have one because I'm sure people are gonna be into this one. We have another one at the shop right now, which is not as stock, has a different front end and things like that. And I think it's got, there's some sort of issue that we're dealing with on that bike, but this one should be ready to go pretty quick. And it is highly stock, which is always nice. So that's a good looking TDR250, I'm excited about that. And then this is where it gets weird. I think most of the bikes that we were talking about earlier, most people at the shop were super excited about. I think most people maybe not as excited about this one as I am because I'm a huge BMW nerd. So this is where I differ from my colleagues here. But this is a Krauser MKM1000. The short version of the story here is that if you're a BMW nerd like me, you'll know the name Krauser. Michael Krauser came up with some products including luggage, which is probably best known for. But he at one point decided, hey, I want to build the ultimate version of a BMW sport bike, road bike. So he kind of went about it in the Bimota way. He built his own frame and he used the drivetrain, like the engine and transmission and final drive from a BMW R100 RS. Now he also, what made him really stand out compared to a lot of people that were doing similar things at the time, he developed his own custom 4-valve heads. At the time they were using 2-valve heads, which bumped power, but there were some reliability issues. I think when he originally built them, they were supposed to be for race applications, and there was the general idea that, hey, we're gonna build these heads, sell them to you, and then you as the customer need to do the finishing work in terms of porting, milling, things like that, depending on what your application is. And a lot of people just bought them, slapped them on, and then kind of blew top ends up. This one, thankfully, does not have the Krauser heads. This one has the original heads. And a lot of guys are gonna, or a lot of collectors and things like that are gonna disagree with me when I say thankfully, because they think that, A, the Krauser heads look really cool, and they do make more power. And I think a lot of people say if you want a Krauser, you need to have the heads on it. But if I was to have this bike, I'd want to ride it. I wouldn't have to worry about how the heads are doing or anything like that. I would just take the stock motor, because everything around it is crazy enough. I mean, you know, Riff will show this in the B-roll. It's one big piece of bodywork, and the tank is a metal piece hidden under this cover. But the frame on this is absolutely incredible, and it's one of the most interesting pieces to me. It's bright purple. It's actually one of the things I don't understand about the bike. I think if you build a frame that looks this distinctive and this cool, why would you cover it up as much as possible with this and this? But hey, I didn't build a bike. When I build a bike, you can criticize me. So anyway, the Krauser, it's MKM1000. They originally tried to make about, I want to say 237 or 240 of those, but I can't remember off the top of my head, I apologize. I don't think they made all of them, but they're just an interesting oddity in the world of German motorcycling. This thing did a lot of things before BMW or even other companies in terms of that trellis frame I was talking about and other components like that. So our shop will go through this, we'll get it running, and then I'm gonna fight everyone else so I can get the first test ride on it, because I actually have a similar bike personally, a 1984 BMW R100 CS Last Edition, which shares a lot of components, so maybe we'll get both bikes together and Adam and I will trade off and try them both and talk about what's cool, what's different, and things like that, because that's one of the things I love about being here at Iconic is you get access to bikes that don't come up very often, which is very cool. So we're gonna try to do our best to explore them and share them with you. So that's all 24 bikes. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death. And if there's anything that we've talked about that you find really fascinating that you might want to get for yourself before it goes up on the auction site, that's no problem. We do that every once in a while. Go ahead and email me, Abhi, A-B-H-I, at iconicmotorbikes.com, and we'll see if we can't work something out. As always, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.